Well, hello and welcome everybody to our event this evening, We Are Nature. This is part of Fall into Nature, which is Plantlife Digital Engagement Month. And we have a nice number of you here this evening, so thank you for joining us. This evening is brought to you through Magnificent Meadows Cymru and the Verge campaign. These projects are exploring the space that we feel arts can hold for the conservation debate. We have three exceptional artists joining us from across the UK today, all of whom work with plants. First up, we have Anne-Mie Melis, who lives in Pontypridd, South Wales, and she's surrounded by a rich industrial past and of course her meadows. Her work draws inspiration from plants, evolutionary biology and science, and she explores art as a tool for social and environmental change. Then next up, we have Nessie, who is joining us from Wadshurst in Sussex. And she is drawn to road verge and the plants from a lost bucolic era that are still thriving undisturbed. And Nessie paints these threatened spaces in exquisite detail onto abandoned road signs. And then finally, we are joined by Caroline Deer, who lives in the Isle of Skye. But today she is joining us from Deeside because she's undertaking a residency at the barn, and we're thankful to the barn for providing her a quiet space this evening, and we can't wait to hear more about her explorations with moss with a dancer called Molly Danter. Caroline is a qualified architect and a field botanist, and she explores our relationship with the landscape. I have lots to say about Magnificent Meadows Cymru and the Road Verge campaign, but today is not it's not my stage today. So I'll be feeding lots of links and things that I think are exciting about those projects into the chat. Please copy and paste and have a look at those later. And also use this space, the chat space, to communicate with us as well. The three artists will be asking each other questions about their work, but we hope to have a little bit of time at the end to hear from you and to hear your questions also. If we don't get a chance to do that, then please do join us next week for the workshop and we'll be able to explore those again. That's about it from me. I'm going to hand you over to Anne-Mie and please enjoy. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Anne-Mie Melis, and I'm a visual artist, and my practice is related to our natural environment, and it's related to, I work with plants, the abundance of plant life, and I try to address ecological issues with my work. So like Cassie said already, I'm inspired by science and plant science and evolutionary biology. And I'm just very curious about nature and also about our future nature. So we live in a technology infiltrated world, and I'm just wondering where our nature is going with everything what's happening around us. So I am a kind of multidisciplinary artist, and so I use lots of different materials to make my artwork. And so I make drawings, I make sculptural work, I use photography, and I build them sometimes in installations. Sometimes there are interactive elements to my work, and also I'm using moving image. So there's a variety of different ways that I use to make my artwork. And so quite exceptional materials that I have used until now is for example, tar. So I made a kind of growing organism, and I made all the individual drips by using tar. So that is probably the most strange material that I have used. But I also like to use digital technologies. Besides moving image, I have been able to use a 3D technology to make probably my smallest artwork that I have made. So the title for the artwork is Future Seed Pod Fossil. So as I look at how nature could look in the future, I think this artwork is probably one of the nice examples of kind of future impression of technology infiltrated art, or an arty organism that I have made. So I also use natural specimens when I make exhibitions, or when I'm inspired by natural specimens. So I found a large fossil on the footpath next to our house, and that has been an inspiration for me the last 2 years since I have found it to make my artwork. I have used a high visibility fabric to make a high visibility vest for a plant. So that's quite a strange variant from high visibility vest that we people are wearing, but that was a nice work as well. So and I also like to collaborate with other people while I make my art. So one more thing that I want to say here. So I made a work with fabric. I made a flag, a red flag, and you see it in the middle of the image. It's installed in a landscape that is scarred by the fire. So I live in Pontypridd in the valleys, and every spring we have the problems of the bracken fires that are deliberately lighted. And so I thought I will put a flag and make a film of it. And on the flag was the text, "Inaccessible Restoration of Landscape." So that was probably one of the most direct statements that I wanted to make in relation to our environment, and how some people are neglecting our environment. The last work that I want to describe here is a herbarium. So I have an herbarium of blind petunias, and this is an artwork that came into being after my residency in the School of Biosciences in Cardiff. And so I worked with a geneticist who provided seeds from mutated petunia flowers, and I grew these petunia flowers, and I followed up the growing process and documented it in film. And that was in a very engaging exhibition with 3 projections and 3 trunks and shapes that I built on top of the 3 trunks. So that's a bit of an overview of a variety of projects that have been happening. So I'm going to the next slide. So, oops, too quickly. So I have been inspired also by a text that I've been using in my work, and it's a text from Anne-Mie, and she's an anthropologist, and she writes about the Anthropocene and about contaminated diversity. So, and about the potential collaborators for a livable Earth. So, when she speaks about slow disturbance. So I'm going to read a couple of phrases from the text. Our time is the Anthropocene, the age of human disturbance. The Anthropocene is an era of mass extinction. Yet the Anthropocene is also an era of emergence. What has emerged? I use the term contaminated diversity to refer to cultural and biological ways of life that have developed in relation to the last few hundred years of widespread human disturbance. Contaminated diversity is collaborative adaptation to human disturbed ecosystems. So she talks about who we are and what we have as available working partners for a livable Earth. And then also she talks about slow disturbance that refers to anthropogenic ecosystems in which many other species can live. Slow disturbance landscapes are those that nurture interspecies collaborations. So here is already, I think, a little nudge to the title of the talk, that that we are, as humans, not the only living organisms that are on the world, and that so we have to acknowledge all living organisms and also acting according to that. So, okay, so I'm going to the next slide. So another element that I try to use when I'm making my artwork is interactivity. So when I have one of a series of my artworks is called Nurturing. So it's, if you would elaborate on that, nurturing nature. So it links for me to encourage people to take care of nature. So I installed a light above just regular areas of the wooden floor, of the forest floor. And so the light is nurturing the nature that's under the installation. And but so also the installation takes away the light. So you see one photograph is where it's taken in the daytime, and the other photograph is taken in the nighttime. But so the light that is installed in the installation, there is a movement sensor installed. So the light will only be switched on when people approach the installation. If they stand still, then the light will switch off again. If they move around, the lights will switch on again. So it's like their action will make the light be switched on, and will make the light, make sure that the light is nurturing nature. So this interactivity, I think it's a nice element, and I hope it will encourage people more to think about the action of nurturing nature. So yeah, so the first, so there's 4 prototypes of this installation, and the first installation that I made, I used the interactive element wasn't there yet, so it's on the bottom right corner. So I used a circular light bulb to light a growing peach tree, where lots of peaches were there. You see them in tiny little red dots there. And so for me also, this circular light bulb, of course, is linked to a halo, and it's a very familiar religious iconographic element. And so for me, it also represented that you have to respect nature and yeah, honor nature. So I think it's really nice to see it like that, the shining halo above the abundance of nature. So in the second prototype of the installation, it was there was an installation in Duke's Wood in Nottingham. Then the third prototype was in Lithuania. It was exhibited in Lithuania alongside the exhibition Silent Stage. And then the last different guise of the exhibition was exhibited in Coventry Biennial, and there the installation was installed inside a server room of a building that was out of use. So it was really nice to see the contrast with the electrical equipment, and then the lights that were feeding soil that I brought in from Wales, from Belgium, and from Coventry, where the exhibition was happening. So yeah, that was also quite interesting to do. So I'm going to the next slide. So the next slide is about a project that I did with a colleague, Roger Locher. And so it was, it's called Chicory Flexine, and it was happening in G39 in an artist-run space in Cardiff, and it was part of the Unite project. So, and we wanted to talk about sustainable living, about the food we eat, and so it was responding also to our contemporary nature, but then in the city. So, and what we did was we wanted to grow the project for the plan for the project was to grow vegetables inside the gallery. So we decided on growing chicory in the darkness of the cupboard of in the gallery, and so we managed to grow the chicory. So the whole process was documented, and it's culminated in a performative element. And so there was Roger, who dressed up like a chicory with cardboard, and he invited the people to ask questions to the chicory entity. So, and then so the people were invited to an audience with chicory, and so they could ask questions. And then on the screen later in the evening, the chicory entity was answering questions of the public. So it was a very engaging and entertaining way of finalizing our project of growing chicory in the gallery. So there was also a dance with the greenhouse. And so we had the display of all the research that we did. We traveled to the single producer of chicory in the UK. So all these elements were displayed and noted down, and it was very engaging. So when it links again to there is the growing population, the growing world population demands that we perhaps have to rethink the way how food is grown, and the way can it be more local, can it happen in the community. So the project was linked to this to these ideas. So it's the vegetable world that was on focus here. So, and now I'm talking about the most recent project that I have been doing. So I was able to travel to Belgium to go for a residency, and the residency happened in Frans Masereel in Belgium, very close by to the place where I was born. So I was very keen and very happy that it could go ahead, although all the restrictions with COVID. And so it's all related to printing. And so I took the images of the fossil, and I wanted to make a link from the valleys where I live and where I found the fossil. And I want to make a link to Belgium, to the place where I was, and where also previously has been industrial coal, not so far away from where I lived. And so my idea was to visualize or think of how the plants could have looked like that where the fossil originated from. And I wanted to use the plants from the vicinity of the place where I was staying in Frans Masereel Centrum. And I wanted to create a visual of a growing plant. So I researched and I tried out the polymer etching. And so you see the image of the fossil that's printed with the polymer etching technique, so a technique that I never did before. And then I also used a laser cutting to make a perspex mold, and I used it to make a blind embossing. So I combined these two techniques to make a print. And so the inspiration came then. So I made designs and using plants from the surroundings of where I was, the plant was growing next to the place where I was staying. And I used common yarrow, so milfoil. And it was a plant that I noticed in the grass, and I thought it was really beautiful and very intricate, almost like looking like lace. And then when I looked it up, it's a plant that in antiquity was used by soldiers. It was kept by soldiers to if they would have a wound. So it could stanch the flow of blood from a wound. So I immediately, of course, I was thinking of the nurturing element of nature. So I thought, yes, this is a good plant to use. So here, so there's this nice connection again to nurturing. Nature is nurturing itself. And so also in the summer, I did the course with Plantlife for botanical naming, and because I'm where I live, there is this very old meadow that is next to our house, and so I've made some films with it, and so we have 2 cows that are grazing the meadow, so we are conserving the meadow to keep it as healthy and as natural as possible, or even go back to previous states of being. So alongside my artwork, I also am using I'm organizing outreach projects. So outreach projects for schools and in the community for different ages. And so one of the projects that I'm showing, 2 of the projects that I'm showing here is a project that I did in Astrid Primary School, where with year 5, the school had an area available that they wanted to change into a garden for the school. So together with the children, we asked them what they wanted for the garden, how they wanted to make the layout for the garden. So they make drawings, and they came up with loads of ideas. So, and we all put it together in a manual for the project, for the garden project. So from these drawings, we distilled a design for a path that was going through that garden. And also they made drawings, and in the manual, they were showing with drawings and text how to sow seed, how to grow potatoes, and so that they could, once the garden path was installed, that they can continue with the development of the garden. So it was really nice, the project. And then another project that's very recent from last year is the Tree of Life. So Pontypridd Museum wanted to do an exhibition related to Pontypridd 2120. And so I did one of the parts of the 3 parts of the exhibition. So my part was linked to biodiversity. And so I created, together with school children from Asproad Primary School and the Young Friends of the Earth, we created an online exhibition with drawings made by the children. So, and I see that I am slightly over time, long off time. So yes, I just wanted to finalize with the beautiful fungi and wax caps that I have found in my very old meadow. And so here's another slide. And I think that's it for now. So.
Hello, thank you, Cass. Thank you, Anne-Mie. My name's Nessie Ramm. I'm a painter and I'm going to share some slides of my Verge project with you. I paint in oils. There we are. So I'm a painter. I've always painted plants, and I've always tended to be interested in the plants in an urban context and sort of edgeland context in cities and allotments and car parks, places like that. And I became interested in road verges 3 or 4 years ago for my paintings, as a subject for my paintings. And one of the reasons was I walk through the countryside. I live in the High Weald, down in southeast England, and it's a very lush green part of the world. But on some of the walks, I noticed that the farms were very intensively farmed, like this particular field. And there was not an inch left for nature. I had my camera with me and I was hoping to take some pictures of flowers for paintings, which I always do when I'm out walking. And there was none to be had. And it got me thinking. And then on the journey home, I saw far more flowers on the road verges. So from then on, I started to keep an eye out wherever I was and spotted little plant communities all over the place that seem to be thriving often. And I saw plants that I've never seen in the wild, so to speak, right there on the road verges, in service stations and next to the tarmac, seemingly thriving. So that was what sparked my interest initially. There's a few photos here. The orchids is a fantastic roadside nature reserve up in North Kent, up on the North Downs. I'd never seen so many orchids all together. And there were trucks going past, every minute. So it's a strange habitat, but full of wildlife. These are some photos from the A21, which is my local A road. So I know it quite well. And I found communities along the way. Early purple orchids there. Thundering traffic, as usual. Viper's bugloss. Fantastic plants that I'd rarely seen. So wherever I went, I tended to stop the children. My 2 daughters soon got used to this being a part of family holiday. Mum would jump out with the camera and take pictures in a lay-by or the service stations. They got quite used to it. So this was the first painting that resulted from all this interest in taking of photos. On the walk with the barren field, when it came to crossing over the A24 on the South Downs, I found loads of cowslips and I couldn't believe it. And so I took lots of photos, and this was the painting that resulted. And the painting was done on a road sign, an old 30-mile-an-hour road sign, which I just painted onto I peeled off the sign and painted onto the raw metal. So, and this was the next one then, from the A21, a larger sign with goat's rue and bramble all growing through each other. And another one from another road junction further down. And that's a studio shot, just so you can see them all together. So that was the beginning. You can see the one diversion sign at the bottom. That was the first time I started to use the text of the road signs. Because up until that point, the road signs has been a convenient metal support to paint on, nothing more than that really. But the diversion was from Essex, from the A120, from a little lay-by with metre-high plants, very dry, hot, lots of wild carrot and bristly ox tongue, very spiky, bright yellow. So I decided I would use this diversion sign to paint on, but actually keep some of the yellow for the flowers. I found this sign abandoned in a hedge. I've been a litter picker for my village for a couple of years, and this was one of my finds. Rather than take it to the recycle centre, I decided it would have a new life. And I also learned a lot about road signs, in that the majority are, the metal ones are just plain metal sheet with a sticker stuck on. So the road sign is actually just a big sticker. So I had the joy of trying to peel that off and peel off the industrial glue. Bit of a learning experience. So the yellow remained, and the text, which was originally black, in the end came off. So that was the result. And I liked the result. I thought I'd like to start working with the text of the road signs. And I also thought I longed to go visit motorway service stations, and one of my little dreams, my hiking dreams, was to hike over the Clackett Lane, which is a rural lane which happens to go over the M25 on a little road bridge. It's a lovely little lane, and then suddenly you're above the M25, and it gives its name to the services. So I realised this dream with my good hiking friend a couple of years ago. We hiked over the bridge. It was early spring, very cold spring, just the blackthorn was out, but that became a painting. And then I returned. I longed to return in the summer, and I wasn't disappointed. There were so many plants there around the motorway services. I was amazed. I found 20 species within 10 minutes. And I did decide to pick them because they were very abundant. So I actually did pick some in the name of art, and made a bouquet and made a painting out of that. And I will be making some of Cobham, because I stopped off at Cobham and found damselflies, teasels, goldfinches flying around the teasels. It was like some kind of wildlife movie, just to the side of the car park. So that will be a project coming soon. And meanwhile, back at home, I've been part of a local project to reintroduce wildflowers to our verges in my local village, which was started by myself and my neighbour Helen Yan, who's a garden writer. She launched it in the Telegraph. So that's been going along in parallel, which has been great, because I've learned from Helen the science of meadow making and restoring, well, when you start with sort of thatch grass that's been cut with clippings left for 20 or 30 years, and how to turn that into meadow. It's been a really good learning experience alongside. And I've learned about yellow rattle, and we've made signs, and we've involved the local community, and I consider it a part of my practice alongside my paintings. It's work in progress. We've had some successes, we've had some failures, we've had some accidental strimmings and people parking on the middle of it and all of that, but great successes too. And then along came lockdown in the spring of 2020, and it doubled our successes overnight. Suddenly the sites that I've never seen flowered were in full bloom. And this is a little car park behind the one-stop shop in my village, just a few meters of scrappy ground really. And it turns out it was full of wildflowers just waiting to go. I've been waiting for years and years. So this became a painting with hawkbit and common vetch and plantain, which is all there. This is just a small section of that car park verge. And I decided to include invertebrates and a couple of vertebrates as well in this one. The text of the sign, it wasn't present. It wasn't a sign that was present in the car park, but it started to reflect the conversations that were going on at the time in lockdown. People were suddenly talking about nature a lot more. There were no planes in the sky. And it was a real moment where people were valuing nature local to them. And it was a glorious spring. So this is the painting that resulted. And here's some of those invertebrates up close they're just masked off. So then they're unpainted, really to represent the invertebrates that are supported by a flowering verge. It's not just about the plants, but also to represent what might be lost, what could be lost, or what we are losing if we don't change our ways. So this is my last slide. This is the most recent painting, up to date. It's the companion piece to the last one. It's a section of road verge at the bottom of a hedgerow on the A21 in Lambhurst in Kent. And I've enjoyed showing this one as an installation. An opportunity arose to show for the Wells Art Contemporary show in Wells Cathedral. And rather than putting it on the wall as a painting, I was able to show it as a road sign, complete with sandbags, which I made on the sewing machine. And I really enjoy actually getting the work out there in the public domain, because it hasn't, before then it was locked down and the art industry sort of shut down pretty much. So actually it was a joy to get it out there amongst real people and take part in the debate. So there you are, that's me.
Thank you so very much, Nessie. Beautiful work. And I've added some links into the chat about the Road Verge campaign, which obviously links into Nessie's work. And also a lovely video that a colleague of mine, Dr. Kate Petty, made during our last digital workshop. And actually there's I don't know if you've seen it, Nessie, but there's some of your work in that. So it's worth looking. So do copy the links out of the chat bar. So now we'll hand over to Caroline. Thank you, Caroline.
Hi, So my name's Caroline Deere. I live on the Isle of Skye. I'm an artist and work with nature, with plants. And as an artist, I think it's important to highlight the unnoticed and undervalued plants around us, to deepen understanding of the plants, to widen knowledge of the importance of plants, and to bring increased awareness of our dependence on the natural world, to value the known and the unknown in the wider world. So this is where I live, and I work with plants. So this is the type of plants that I've got around me. And this is an image from the studio wall. I'm interested in structures and in how traditional techniques. And I think of the role of the artist as bringing together process, plants, place with people, and allowing people to see and understand the world around them in a different way. So if we're thinking of process, one of the early processes I learned was rope making, traditional making rope or string by hand. And so one of the first projects I did with this was called Entwined Suanta, and it was 100 ropes made from the plants all around close to my house, starting off with the plants I knew people used to make, and then exploring other plants as I developed and learned and sort of noticed different plants. So there's buttercup and bog cotton, but I mean, I started working with dandelion and all sorts of things. So as the project progressed over 3 months, you can see the when I displayed it each time, it's slightly different, but the plants on the left, that was the more wintry ones, and the ones on the right is the more summery ones when I was getting into the very delicate grasses and things. So if we move on to thinking about place, this is a place on Skye that archaeologists excavated for over 8 years, an Iron Age, well, pre-Iron Age. It was used for thousands of years, but one of the main finds was the cave was closed off with the body of an Iron Age woman. She was on a bed of willow with very specific plants with her red campion and holly. And for a year, I went around that site and photographed each month. I brought a cloak and just photographed it in different places. And then for the exhibition at the end, I made 3 mantles for Bridget. So the archaeologists named the body Bridget. There was a local place named Kilbride, but also it references Saint Bridget and Bride, who was the pre-Celtic goddess of Scotland. So these are plants associated with her, birch, dandelion and bog cotton and rush. So another way of pulling projects together is part of the exhibition is I make books. So this is a page from the book when I've spoken to other people and get their views around different perspectives of a specific site. So the text at the bottom says, the archaeologists talked about the potency of objects coming from a specific place. And this was 5 fire cracked stones from the site. So thinking about place in a different context, I've been fortunate enough to go on a number of different residencies. And at first I thought I wouldn't be able to make strong work in response to a place that I didn't know very well. But it's quite interesting how you can really focus and get the essence of a place quite quickly. So this is the north of Norway. And this mountain in the background really dominated the scene, and there was lots of stories related to it. So I made a hat out of birch bark, echoing that mountain and thinking, what is a mountain and the strength of a mountain. The birch bark was traditional material used there, and that was sewn with birch bark root. So, and Finland, I've also done a few residencies in Finland, and reed is an ecological problem in Finland. So for us, reed this is Phragmites australis, it's seen as quite a nice plant with particular habitat, but with all the little islands and stuff in Finland, it's quite invasive. And we were doing an exhibition looking at all different ways to try and see this plant in different light. The piece at the very start was also made out of the reed leaves that I'd split and tied together. So closer to home, this is from Cooper in Fife, a small market town, and they have an art festival and involve different artists. So the theme of this festival was fate, and the town, what's it called? They had 3 bog myrtle wreaths on not their motto, but I can't remember the word anyway. And so I made this coat out of bog myrtle, and it was meant to be a coat of good luck. So this was it photographed at home before it went down to Cooper. And it was displayed in a really lovely old-fashioned shop where the doorbell rang as you went in, and people were allowed to try the coat on and walk around the town. And I knew it was successful when I got sent a photograph of somebody wearing it in the co-op while they bought their lottery ticket. So thinking of materials and processes and responding in different ways to different situations, maybe different scales. I've done a series of wrapped stones. So there's something about the essence and the strength of stone and then the delicacy of plants, and it's how those two intermingle. So there's different ways of exploring that. I've done a number of pieces with this, which is hair moss, polytrichum, and it's also exploring fragility and strength. So that and this next piece I think shows that. This was a piece that you walked inside. It's displayed in the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. And so it's sort of very fragile and yet really quite strong. And it's this combination of or kind of contradictory things about plants, which is really interesting. So this is a piece made for, I don't know if people have heard of Angus McPhee. This was an exhibition honouring him and his work. And I was asked, so this was make a pair of slippers for him so he could relax. So made out of meadow grasses and flowers. So I've also done collaborations with other artists. This is looping. And this was with Alec Finlay again for the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. And it's for a monument. This was going to be buried and will rot. And this was a piece with Hannah Taluki. So she was going to, this is all birch bark. It had to be really flexible for her to move. She was going to be moving in really different ways. And it needed to come to pieces and also turn inside out. So quite a stiff brief to work to. I work with other plants. So sphagnum makes peat, and it's really lovely material to work with. I do installations in galleries, and it's like thin layers that I apply on the gallery wall, and then it's painted over at the end of the exhibition, and also screen prints. And I also work with text and use words in different ways. And work with people. So thinking about how you work as an artist, I think there's all different ways. So one of the things that I do is do walks with people, and you just have conversations evolve and you're highlighting something, and you do, it's really good. So the Verge project is one of the reasons I'm here, because linking up with Plantlife. So I've been looking at the Verge where I live, and it's really important in lots of different respects, creatively, ecologically, and metaphorically. So the Verge only exists because we've made roads or tracks through the landscape, and it's that bit of that strip of land which connects us all and isn't connected to the farming land or the whatever land is beyond that. So it's often a refuge for other plants, as Nessie was showing. But the other things you find along the Verge, I call these found sculptures, and there's lots of quirky little interactions, but it's the common space, it's a relic of the commons. So there's a quote from Christopher Alexander: "Without common land, no social system can survive." So it's really, really important in terms of how we interact and how we, it's this neutral communication space. So over the last 5 to 10 years, these exchange boxes have developed, and people are very creative in how they build them, expressing themselves politically. The one on the right is called a blessings box. So that's just placed in the middle of, nowhere. It's not near a town or anything. And people just put food in and take food out. So as Nessie was saying, the Verge is also really important for wildlife. And even on Skye, this is really important. So Richard Mabey had a quote from 2013. The Verge represents Britain's largest unofficial nature reserve. And it is this ignored space which we really need to value. So these are melancholy thistle and a selection of different orchids. So even on Skye, where you think it's might be quite good habitat, the upland hay meadow habitat is a valued habitat, and the plants are now only found abundantly on the verges, such as melancholy thistle, that would normally have been more up in the hills and stuff, to do with farming practices changing and maybe overgrazing and different uses. So this is, so I've got a quote here from Darwin. I don't know if you can see that. Darwin likened the complexity and diversity of the natural world to entangled bank, even in a constant physical environment. Natural selection forever leads to evolving as individuals battle to beat predators, parasites, and social competitors. So this verge is this sort of battleground where lots of things go on, and also people engage with it in different ways. So one of the things I did was a lot of verge walks, and thinking about the verge in lots of different ways. And I interviewed people and different people. Some people, as one woman who'd had a really bad road accident, and she'd used the verge by her house to relearn to walk, but also to get her brain working again, naming all the plants and remembering more each time. But it's the quote from George Monbiot: society's like an amoeba. It moves from the margins, not the center. And it's these edge areas where lots of action can happen, the edge effect where there's more biodiversity. So for us as humans, this is also important, you know, mixing different disciplines is quite stimulating. So along the verge walks, we had hand lenses, we did drawings, we told stories, we named the plants, we gave the Gallic names and the derivation, or all sorts of things. Some people remembered, we had conversations, people remembered their own games from childhood. So I've tried to illustrate one of the conversations to show how rounded it can be. So on Skye, talking to my neighbour about growing food 50 years ago, climate change, peat formation evidenced on Skye, 1815, year of no summer, collapse of the Roman Empire, 5 years of no crops, 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, Saxons, Angles as refugees, squatters in Roman villas, 1385, the Black Death, skills loss evidenced in cathedrals, contemporary refugees, aware of our own precarity, we are not growing enough food on Skye. So that was before the COVID, but we were very aware on Skye of this sort of depth of the way climate had changed fairly recently, the last 30, 40 years, but in the deeper past, and then how you can, you know, refugees and things, it can just, everything is continually changing, and then coming back to the central us where we were standing. We used phones to identify plants, all sorts of different ways of looking at the verge, smelling, tasting. So one of the things was I've been collecting words that are associated with the verge. So here we've got sort of more the official words that are used to describe the verge, different ways of looking at the verge. I hope you can all read that. And then here, and I can't read these now because this is in the way. I've got, I can't see the top one. I've got chaotic outspace, seasons timeline, creative space, verdant, extraordinary, generous, liminal, literal, long acre, a place of crossover, virtual fabric of the community, agreed symbolic consensus of the edge. So these are all words that I've gathered from the walks, from the conversations, from talking to people. So this is different people's perception of the Verge over with these discussions. So it just gives a different. My next slide won't go. Why doesn't my next slide want to go? Okay. Yeah, so often the low light is really gorgeous. That's at home. So again, making books. So last year, following on from The Verge, I picked some flowers each week, and I've identified them, got their Gaelic, English and Latin names, but also then in the book, I've paired each week with a particular word associated with the Verge, and maybe how we look at the environment or relate to, and just make us think about that contradiction. So this is plant blindness. I'm not sure if you've heard of this term, but it's used to highlight not only our physical inability to see the plants around us, but also to show how we are unable to realize the importance that plants have for us. This was shown and defined by two American biologists, Elizabeth Schussler and James Wandersee, in 1999. The original definition had 4 elements: an inability to notice or see plants in the environment, a failure to recognize the importance of plants in the biosphere and in human affairs, a failure to see or pay attention to plants in one's own daily life, and an anthropocentric ranking of plants as inferior to animals. So as a sort of pulling together the different words and different perspectives of the Verge, I've written this poem as part of that. The Verge is a Cinderella space, the virtual fabric of the community, Britain's largest unofficial nature reserve. The Verge marks the edge of freedom, the agreed symbolic consensus of the edge, cultural fragments of past landscapes. The Verge allows the wild and the controlled, space for expansion, a change of viewpoint. So you can see here, it's really clear the difference, how the managing of. So one of the things that my project finished with was a radio program. So I think that's the link, and it's also on my website. But I think Cassie was going to put it into the chat. But I'd like to end with a quote from Anna Singh's book, The Mushroom at the End of the World. Without stories of progress, the world has become a terrifying place. The ruin glares at us with horror of its abandonment. It's not easy to know how to make a life, much less avert planetary destruction. Luckily, there is still company, human and non-human. We can still explore the overgrown verges of our blasted landscapes, the edges of capitalist discipline, scalability, and abandoned resource plantations. We can still catch the scent of the latent commons and the elusive autumn aroma. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Really beautiful to see your work there, and I love the poetry also, and the idea of the road verge being the unofficial nature reserve. A truly beautiful idea. I think Plantlife could run with that as a campaign. Welcome back, everybody. I've got just one question for you all, and then I understand you've got questions for each other. So my question is that, I mean, it's clear that there are links and your work relates and resonates with Plantlife work. But I wonder whether you could speak a little bit about the value from your perspective of the artist's voice in terms of amplifying these messages. Maybe to Caroline first. And you're on mute, but I think
yes,
thank
yeah,
you.
No, that's fine. I've muted after the thing. I think it's really, really important. I think artists can bring different things together, so and can sort of link which otherwise that might not have any connection, and we can provide different ways in an unchallenging way, I think, and that's our job, to just provide gentle ways in all different ways to bring people together, to think politically, to question, to think that people can change the things around them, to become more aware. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. Yeah.
Fantastic. Maybe over to you, Nessie.
Yeah, I think, although I don't sort of feel like I'm deliberately making statements, I feel rather that I'm processing it in real time. And I feel that perhaps that's what artists in general are doing, is processing on the edge. Culture sort of processes things through art, through books and poetry and physical artworks and films, to reflect on what's going on and to try to work out where to go next. So I feel that art is doing that.
Anne-Mie.
Yeah, I think the artist has just a different voice and a different view on things, and when people see an installation or see an artwork, they see it through the eyes of the artist, but they can also make up their own mind of what they think of the artist, of the work. So it's a very open invitation to create thoughts and to be so the artist brings over a message, but then there is still the interpretations of the people who see the artwork, that it can go in different directions. So it's just a different view as well. Yeah, different view that has been offered to the viewer. That's encouraged. The artist encouraged the viewer to change their own view of the world, I think, to see a different view. Yeah.
So that space on the fringe that Caroline was talking about also. Mm-hmm. Caroline, perhaps I can hand over to you to ask Nessie and Anne-Mie some questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for Anne-Mie, I was wondering, I find it intriguing, your combination of digital and man-made materials with the natural, and do you enjoy exploring and exploiting this edge? That's what.
Yeah, so I definitely like exploring new technologies and digital technologies, and for me I'm just a very curious person. So there was, for example, with the possibility to do the residency, to explore the 3D printing, laser cutting, laser 3D scanning. So I was surprised myself that I could become so engrossed in the process of, for example, learning the 3D imaging technology. So it's and for that particular residency that I was doing, the process of the making and also the cost of, for example, the 3D printing completely defined the artwork at the end that came out of it, because the cost guided me to making smaller and smaller and smaller, because I thought then it will become less expensive, then my budget will bring me further to make more trials. And that's how I came to that tiny little 3D printed artwork. So I think these digital technologies, any new technologies that are developed are, and I describe it sometimes as an over technological world that we live in. but I think it's definitely also scientific research that will bring us forward to find solutions for certain problems that are there at the moment, related to climate change and related to how we are going to solve all these issues. Yeah, so I definitely like that fine border of technology and then combining it with a subject that's related to the environment or to nature.
Mm. And Nessie, it's a really practical one. Well, I'll put the two together. It was actually, how do you find and select the signs that you paint, and what process do you go through? And then also the text and the image working. I think you spoke a little bit about that, and I like how it makes you reassess the meaning of the words. So yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, so some of them I found on my litter picking rounds, and I decided to put them in the studio rather than take them down to the recycling centre. And I just I started using them because I had a creeping feeling that there was already enough objects in the world, and I'd started painting on metal, and I didn't want to just create a new metal object when there were these metal objects dumped in a hedge. So that's how I started. So yeah, so some of them, you know, the diversion that was found, the messages, the lockdown messages were really, they weren't from the actual place that I painted, but they because of the lockdown, they were signs that I were familiar from roads, from driving, and they just seemed to sort of echo the conversation that was going on at the time. Some signs, so I found signs. I've bought secondhand signs, and I've bought new signs as well. It turns out anyone can buy a road sign, you just can't put it up. But anyone can order any kind of commercial road sign. So I have had some made, and yeah, the messages come from two different sources. I would like to do some, I am planning to do some that are actually on copies of the real sign of a particular place. For example, the orchids up in North Kent. I'd love to do the road sign that's actually from there, just covered with the orchids, to be site specific. So some of those I do plan to do.
Great. So
who's next?
Nessie, do you want to go
Right.
next?
Yes, okay. Well, why don't I ask, well, in fact, my question to both of you is about time. So it's really quite similar. So perhaps Caroline first. It's your work delves right back into the past, in human timescales, with archaeology and with weaving and traditional techniques that you've perhaps resurrected, but right also back further into geological time and peat, making of peat. And so you're dealing with such long time scales. And I wonder how does that affect how you see the future and your hopes for the future, your fears for the future, given that your work is so rooted in human history and beyond?
I think that's the kind of, I think it's really, really important. And I think that's the key to knowing about the future and having skills for the future and understanding. So it's like knowing those deep roots. And I'm just feel so aware of all the things we've lost, the skills we've lost, our understanding of the plants around us, how different things, how materials have been used, all of that. So yeah, I think it's really fundamental. So yeah, I can't say.
Sorry. It's a big question, but I love the way that your work is so rooted in so many layers of history. So
thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Anne-Mie, so a similar question to you, but what you were talking about just earlier was, for example, your future plants project, your future seed pods, I think they were, and also the project about climate change with the light boxes. I notice your work sort of deals a lot with future possibilities. So again, I wondered how you feel in the light of your work, how your work affects the way you feel about our progress as a humanity into the future, hopes and fears, and any reflections on that with our relationship with the environment.
Yeah, so if I haven't shown many of my drawings, but I have a series of drawings, and they are also a kind of visualizing almost like mechanical, like plant-like structures that are completely influenced by the technology that is around us. So of course, this is a kind of image of a future that is it's an imagined future, but I think, and perhaps people will say, oh my God, what kind of structures are they? But yeah, it looks like living organisms, but it is not natural anymore. That there is only a little bit of natural element to it, and the rest looks quite yeah, it's almost look like a plan for like structures that are half not natural anymore. But I think to show kind of these future drawings it also makes people reflect, because they will think, why is she drawing that? And so it has this trigger to make people think about it. And so for me, it's in a process of immersing in a drawing, and that I work on it, and it's like it's also thinking of how a plant, how the structure of a plant is, how all the functions of a plant are, how could I see myself in the plant. So it's coming closer to an organism in a quite a strange way, but I think it's also, yeah, like I said, giving the viewer a view and reflecting on the present because of the view that I'm giving them, and so also related to a message for the future and how I look at the future. I cannot else than look positive at the future, I think, because the earth, finding the fossil and working also with the fossil. So the fossil goes back 300 million years. And then you realize that we are just this tiny little blip in time where we are now and where we are functioning. And so there is this whole amount of time definitely to come. But it is, of course, we are a little bit in trouble now, and we have to try to find solutions. And you see how people, I think people are more organizing themselves and it goes more into communities. And so, yeah, hopefully, I can't but think positive towards the future. I refuse to think negative about the future. So, yeah.
Great.
So shall I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Caroline, I'm really intrigued by your artwork and the craft that goes in it and the materials. So all the natural materials. and I'm also wondering, a coat made of grass, like you have shown, or others of your work, do you have to take special measures to keep them? Do you think they will last, or do you think there is are they ephemeral? Will they break down? So what is your view about your own work, how you would see it in the future, but of course not a very far future, but
yeah, well, there's different things for different pieces. So some work that's gone to exhibitions or gone abroad or whatever, I treat it like museum pieces. So you wrap it in 2 plastic bags and you freeze it for, there's a particular temperature and it's for 7 days or something. And then when it comes out, you don't open the bags or anything, that kills the bugs, and then you can post it off to your exhibition. So when they open it, they know it's clean, and that's what they do in archives in museums. And I kind of thought, well, this plant material, that's kind of fragile and stuff, but it's amazing. It's, comes out, you let it defrost over a couple of days, and then it's exactly the same. It's really amazing. So that's for pieces that are going into exhibitions or whatever, things like that. Otherwise, for instance, the piece behind me, this is a moss mat that I made for something. And then I was working with Molly and I brought it along, and she just loves it. She's a dancer, and she's just rolls around and is underneath it, and so it's beginning to fall to pieces, which is totally fine by me. And that can then just go back into nature. The coat that you mentioned, I wanted to give that to the community, and so it could be in the local museum or something, but they were too anxious to have it because they worried that they couldn't look after it. Whereas to my mind, it wouldn't matter if it disintegrated, that's fine. I kept meaning to put it on the compost heap and I haven't, and then I use it for different things. And actually often I might take pieces to bits. There's a few pieces that I've made that I then reuse the string to make another piece, or lots of pieces like that. So yeah, I don't see them, lots of them aren't permanent fixed pieces. There is a fluidity to that. Yeah.
I know from my herbarium as well that I have to, in certain time scale, I have to also put the herbarium in the freezer to be careful that there is not any little bugs coming in there.
Yeah. Well, if things are kept dry and no bugs, the things last for years and years, and even the color lasts. If some plants, they, even with the light, they're okay, but others, if you keep them, shaded from the light, the color lasts, and the smell does last as well.
Yeah. That's nice.
I like the way, Caroline, that you're just momentarily interrupting the cycle of plant, that they will go on and around.
Yeah.
You're just extending a certain part of that cycle, but you're not sort of altering it in any way. Everything you're making will eventually rejoin the cycle it was in the first place.
And it's funny because often I often think, oh well, I'll mix materials, but I tend not to. Once I'm working with one material, I like to just work with that simple one material, so it makes it, I don't even mix plant materials, so it can just go back to that same thing. Yeah.
Okay, Nessie. Yeah, so I just admire your abundance of plant life in all these different paintings, and and you say you already are painting plants for a very, very long time. So I was just wondering, so could you make a painting out of memory?
It's a good question. I'm not Sure, I could. Well, in one level, in one sense, yes, I could to a certain extent. But I find the bits that I would have to manufacture would really bug me, because I find that there's a certain amount is predictable, you know, the shape of a leaf or the shine off a leaf. But then there's always, just going out to look at the real world, there's always a certain kind of crackle, or you almost have to run it through a reality filter where things are unpredictable, and there's a certain sort of way that all the dead matter and the living matter fits together, which I just find that I can't predict. And if I'm lazy and just think, oh, I'll just make this up, it doesn't have the same sense of reality of how the community all fits together.
I think that's why it shows in your work, that's why it's got that. Yeah, I just love to paint what's there, you know. I do, because I find it fascinating on this micro scale that there's this community. Yeah. And you know, why is that there? There's a big branch has fallen off a tree right across everything, but it just carries on and it just slowly grows round, and it's the way there's all these traces of layers of the seasons that, yeah, it's hard to replicate. So I tend to, for a painting, I tend to have a plan which I can work out from photos and digitally, and but I'll often sit with I'll go out and forage some actual bramble leaves when it comes to painting them, just to give me that reference from life to work from. So yeah, that I think if I painted something, I could do it, but it would lose a lot if I just painted it from my mind.
Yeah.
You're muted, Cassie.
I hear you.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm having a couple of IT issues at this end, but I think we're just hanging on in there. I had a question about, well, do you consider yourself to be activists, any of you?
I would say subtle activists, or stealth activists.
Stealth activists, I like it.
Maybe kind of like a rhizome growing along underneath the verge. Yeah.
I like that metaphor.
Yeah. I don't know about you two.
I keep on thinking I definitely want to be an activist, and but for me an activist is also like going on a protest march and really being very vocal, but I'm not really like that vocal. I'm more like a timid person, so I really would like my artwork to be to represent a kind of activism. So perhaps we have to find a new name for it.
A gentle activism, maybe. I'm not sure.
Perhaps also gentle activism. Yeah.
I wonder whether anybody in the audience has a question for the panel. And in the meantime, Nessie, what do you consider yourself to be an activist?
Well, I still feel that I'm responding to what I feel is out there rather than it coming from me. I do feel that I'm responding to what I see and hear around. So perhaps it's putting it into images, the unease that people talk about all the time, the fact that the fact that I'm the problem, the fact the problem isn't other people, the problem is me. I'm consuming, and also I'm lamenting the fact that we've got an environmental crisis. So I think it's a response. But I think every time that somebody puts this into art or music, it adds to the conversation. It puts it into the mainstream, and it puts it out there, I suppose. Perhaps for most of us, it's niggling away in the background all the time, perhaps, you know, but we've got to eat and work and live. But worry for the environment niggles away in the background, but so perhaps it takes that niggle and puts it out there in front of us.
A different way to
What with-
consume.
Yeah.
But my colleague is also in the background, Felicity, and she suggested artivism,
Oh yes.
which I think
Yeah.
is perhaps the right word, and leads us on really to sort of encouraging people here today to attend the workshop next week, where we hope we'll create some really interesting work. So we're going to be looking at image using recycled materials. Caroline's going to be bringing word into it as well. And it's going to be a lovely opportunity just to create something as a community together. And that would be really great. Sue has just commented that art helps her to connect with the emotional way with plants. And Anne says, through inspiring ecologically focused art practices and a great discussion, many thanks. Thank you for attending, Anne, and to everybody. I have put a link in for the next workshop. It's online under all the other Fallen to Nature events we have going on. I've also posted links about the Meadows campaign, about the road Verge, but do get in touch with Plantlife. All our details are on the website, and it's just great to broaden this debate. And I think to discuss it with 3 artists, I think it just allows us to explore other areas that perhaps traditionally we might not ordinarily do. So thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant. And thank you to everybody for attending. And we very much hope to see you next week, which I believe is Wednesday. I should know that. Next Wednesday.
Thursday, isn't it?
Thursday. It is Thursday.
Thursday, 21st.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
for
actually,
attending.
something I wanted to say was it was Plantlife who brought the 3 of us together, and we've all really enjoyed just this business of communicating and chatting to each other. Our work's quite different, but it also is so that's been very good. So thanks. Great.
I look forward to seeing what you collaborate and create in the future between you all.
We're planning.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. Good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.